Here we go. So definitely a hot topic of debate and something that is definitely hard to figure out. This is going to be a video on how to fix the final hour of Deadman mode and things that I think should be put into play and things that I think Jagex should do regarding the community to try to come together and make this a better experience for us all. If you guys haven't heard already or haven't seen it, the final hour of Deadman mode was, I mean, up until the very end, very exciting, but once they got into the segmented areas, it turned into a total shit show with teams being insta-killed and people being DDoSed all over the place. It was absolutely ridiculous, and following this, there was a lot of repercussions to come. After this, Rot was found to have had a bot farm, which is something that I don't find surprising and really makes me think about how often this has happened in the past. One thing that I will go ahead and say right off the bat is I think clans are absolutely detrimental to the final hour, but there's something that you can't really take out of the game, so it's something you'll kind of have to work around. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into what I think should be done to fix the final hour of Deadman mode. So the first thing that I would put into place, and this really seems pretty easy to think of right off the bat, I mean, a lot of these are going to have to deal with clans and trying to minimize clans as much as you can. You want this to be fun for everyone, and I think the first way to do that is make everyone's name random whenever you join. This is going to be something that isn't necessarily that hard to figure out. If you are in a clan and you have a relative idea as to who the other best people are in another clan is, you can obviously spot them just by their gear, but to be able to coordinate, it's a lot harder because you don't know which person is which, and really that's something that I think should be employed. Obviously, you'll know the names of your teammates if you need to know them because you'll be talking to them, but you won't be able to single out and target other people based on their name, more so on their gear, and maybe if you actually know what gear they had up until that point. Now, the next step I think is single-way combat all around. While I don't think it's a perfect fix, and neither one is, single-way combat isn't perfect, just as multi-way combat isn't important. There's another step to this that I will have here in a second, but to be able to allow others to pile onto players, it really doesn't help anything. If you think about it, you're just encouraging clans at that point, while single-way isn't the best possible option. You know, out of these two, it definitely is the better. From there, obviously, the problem with single-way combat is that you could just have people boxing each other. That's obviously something that could happen, but there should be something implemented, whether or not it's single way or multi-way, that you have to be taking in or putting out damage pretty much at all times of the final hour. Once you get people into those final zones, once you get the final couple hundred people, if they're going to continue forward with these zone type displays, basically what you're going to have to do is do something that I mean, and it's really hard for me to do it. I can't give you the formula, but I can give you the idea that basically what should be happening at all times is people should be putting in damage to someone else or taking damage themselves. Now, you may hit zeros and you may hit really low, but what Jagex should do is take into account a formula where if you're not taking in or putting out this much damage on average, that's the key point. You could hit a lot of zeros in a row and you shouldn't be dinged for that, but you should at least be trying to put out or take in damage, and this kind of makes it harder for clans to prep for the end, since they'll have to constantly be attacking each other, maybe if there is a clan left, or even during the dead times, you don't have people sitting there doing nothing, building up their supplies for the final 5 to 10 people. Now, with that said, I think the formula implementation into the game would be really exciting, and while I know some people do prep to try to tank as much damage as they can there in the final 100 to 200 people, if your goal is to tank, inevitably you're going to die anyways, so I mean, this doesn't really hurt you that much, and on top of that, this whole show is for the viewers. It's not to make it the most fair necessarily for every single player, because it's just naturally unfair. The whole point of the final hour and these zonal areas that they make is to be able to have as much damage and as much enjoyment for the viewers as you can, and I think that this formula allows you to do that. I never really specified this in the video, but what I meant by with this formula is that if you aren't dealing so much damage per second, inevitably over time you should be getting dealt damage, and now Jagex can figure out what the best implementation is of that damage, but something I'd recommend is if you're not taking out or putting in, you know, an average amount of damage after 5 to 10 seconds, you start to get hit with constant 5s and it starts to progress up. You can't have too low of hits, because if you only start to get hit by 1s, then clans are going to use that to their advantage and they'll just allow themselves to get hit for 1s, and that's a lot less food than they would have to use fighting another player. So that's something you have to take into account. Another thing that I don't know why Jagex hasn't done this yet, we're through so many Deadman modes that I don't know how you can constantly be giving away 20,000 or 10,000 to clans that are just constantly cancer to the game. While they do have their spot and they do their, they do what they do well, it's definitely something that hinders the enjoyment of the whole experience for most people within the game. And so ultimately what I think you should do is, at least if you're willing to give those clans $10,000 to $20,000, offer up a $1,000 prize competition for the best idea for Deadman mode final. That's a lot bigger issue. It's not something that I can give them the best issue, but I think it's something that they should do. They should open it to the community, have you fill out an application of how they should do it, or at least put out a detailed idea, and have either the community vote on that, and have the winner decided by the community maybe in voting on these ideas, or you could have the collective staff at Jagex decide on these ideas if they think that the community vote could be influenced heavily by clans, and that's something that they obviously don't want. Now, the last thing I would say is monitor clans absolutely as much as you can. Now, I know that it's going to take some time on the end of people working for Jagex to just be looking at what these clan members are doing, but when the success of the clan determines how good your final hour is and how much of a spectacle your esport type hour is going to be, it's something that you're going to want to do, and if they aren't already doing it, they should be going forward. Now, obviously, Rot was DQ'd for having a bot farm, but this is the first time I believe they've ever gotten DQ'd for a bot farm, and I wouldn't assume it's the first time they've ever used bots. I know that's a lot of assumptions, but if you're a clan trying to be the best in the game, you're going to be willing to take some risks that most others aren't. On top of that, last thing I would say is try to at least prevent as many DCs as possible. You cannot have the final 10 people, or at least the final 4, all getting DC'd by a clan. Like, that is absolutely ridiculous, and I think that that's something they'll obviously be working on, but as a viewer, I don't know how you allow the final hour to go as badly as it did, and obviously they're going to work on that going forward, but ultimately they need ideas, and I hope that they come to the community for them. I know that they do sometimes ask on Reddit what people want, but if you put a cash value behind that and enable people to think about it as much as they possibly can, I think that you can get some really good ideas out of it. I think Deadman mode is an absolutely amazing time. I think it's a really good time for the game. It really is a good, exciting hour that you're able to get onto the Twitch platform. But if it all comes down to an end like that, it may not be worth the money that they're putting out for it. So basically, these are my ideas. None of them are necessarily correct. It's obviously all due to change, and obviously you guys can improve on them down below in the comments if you want as well. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to leave a like. If there's anything you want to tell me, obviously comment that down below. If you want to see my content as soon as it goes live in the future, make sure to subscribe. But with that said, hopefully you guys have a wonderful day, and peace.